England's national team waited until 2002 before appointing their first foreign manager, the late Sven-Göran Eriksson. Now we have our third in former PSG and Chelsea boss Thomas Tuchel, who penned an 18-month contract until after the 2026 World Cup. But despite Tuchel's outlandish tactical acumen, only one non-national manager has won a World Cup or Euros, and that was the German Otto Rengau's giant-killing Greece team at Euro 2004. So we're going to look at if Tuchel can win the World Cup with England. But first, let's look a little bit into his background. Well, it all started at hometown club TSV Kronbach, where Tuchel played under his father, Rudolf, from the age of 5, until Bagger moved to top-flight Aalborg at the relatively late age of 15, as a towering 6'4" centre half. Tuchel was an insatiably committed, yet demanding teammate with few friends in the dressing room. A manager in the making, some would say. It didn't quite work at Augsburg, with Tuchel released 4 years later, before signing a 2-year deal at German second-tier outfit Stuttgarter Kickers for his first taste of senior football. But after only playing 8 games in 2 years, another step down beckoned into third-tier SSV Ulm, where Tuchel became an integral part of their defence until injuries took a hold of his career. A knee cartilage issue proved the final nail and forced early retirement at 25, after 100 senior games. But there was no time to feel sorry for himself when Tuchel's end, as Ralf Rangnick saw promise in the ambitious, aspiring manager and hired him to coach his Stuttgart youth team in the year 2000. Rangnick's decision paid off when future German international Mario Gomez broke into the first team after thriving under Tuchel's coaching. The real ones remember Mario Gomez. What a player. Themed among world football's deadliest goal scorers in his prime, Gomez went on to net Stuttgart 30 million after a move to Bayern Munich and bagged over 300 goals in a blistering 17-year career. Despite steering the under-19 squad to a Bundesliga title in 2005, Stuttgart let Tuchel go that summer, owing this to a supposed abrasive coaching style and demeanour. This didn't put clubs off, despite lacking a UEFA PRO licence. Andrea Redig brought Tuchel back to Aalborg as the youth team coordinator that proved to be Tuchel's last coaching position, as by 2007. At the tender age of 34, Aylesborg's board had seen enough to kickstart T's managerial career and hand him the second-team reins. An impressive debut season drew admiring glances from top-level clubs, both for his coaching ability and, at times, treacherous regard for referees during games, as they finished 4th. But despite murmurs of temperamental flaws, the Bundesliga side Mainz could not resist signing Tuchel on a 2-year deal as the under-19s manager. And, after steering them to a league title, they promoted their in-house prodigy to replace Jorn Andersen as first-team manager. After respectable 9th place, finished in his first season, the foundations were in place. Rising stars, Schürrle and Alligui, banged in goals as the side bought into Tuchel's pressing machine, securing a 5th-place finish and a place in the Europa League. Schürrle's move to Bayer Leverkusen and Alligui's poor form contributed to a disappointing 3rd season, where they finished 13th and crashed out of the Europa League qualifying rounds. Another 13th place finish followed before the key acquisition of Japanese striker Shinji Okazaki, a future Premier League winner with Leicester, who fired 15 goals to spearhead Mainz's 7th place finish in the 2013-14 season. But Tuchel was ready for the next step and left Mainz with a better record than Jurgen Klopp after 5 seasons, to replace the man himself at Dortmund. Tuchel's first challenge there was starving off the interest in star men Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Shinji Kagawa, and Henrik Mkhitaryan, all of whom he would eventually convince to stay. While trophyless, their first season together showed a lot of promise. With the club record, 82 league goals and 61% average possession, steering them to AB Bundesliga of runner-up berth behind. Bayern, who also beat them on penalties in the German Cup. Final new signings, Ousmane Belmarioza and Rafael Guerreiro, power Tole's Doman to German Cup glory in 2017. After Bell and Aubameyang's goal, secured a 2-1 win over Frankfurt. And that was Tuchel's first major trophy. Unfortunately, This short tenure was marred by controversy behind the scenes and ended just 3 days later. What was the controversy, you ask? Well, it was public scolding of the board's compliance in UEFA's demands that they play a Champions League tie against Monaco just 1 day after the team's bus was bombed, and that sealed Tuchel's acrimonious exit. And to be honest, I think he has a point here. After a stint at Dortmund, Tuchel's stocks were high, and he was now seen as a future star. KO's off-field issues failed to deter PSG from offering him a 2-year deal to replace Unai Emery. Tuchel made his mark before a ball was kicked after signing Mbappe for 180 million euros, the second highest transfer fee of all time. But he was already publicly frustrated at the club's inability to further strengthen that fallback. A league title failed to satisfy the PSG faith, as dismal domestic cup exits left Tuchel with doubters to sway, heading into the 21-22 season. And did he manage it? A domestic quadruple only blighted by a narrow Champions League defeat to Bayern Munich shot Tuchel into world-class contention. But yet again, a fractured relationship with the board saw him leave PSG the following season, after publicly stating that he felt more like a politician in sport than a coach. And just weeks later, Tuchel was back in the dugout, managing Frank Lampard's young Chelsea side, a job he was actually snubbed for in favour of Antonio Conte, while Dortmund manager, the then owner of Roman Abramovich, was instantly rewarded with a Champions League final win over Manchester City. And that meant Tuchel became the first manager to reach consecutive finals with 2 different clubs. And his trophy haul at Chelsea didn't stop at a Champions League. He also added the Super Cup and Club World Cup titles to his collection. But that also coincided with Abramovich's sudden departure. So in came American billionaire Todd Boehly with the Clear Lake Capital Consortium. And once again, there were more reports of a combative relationship with Tuchel and the board, with the main difference being a clash in recruitment approach, and he was shortly sacked afterwards. And now I'm starting to sense a bit of a theme with Tuchel and clashing with members of the board. But we'll get into that in a little bit. But Tuchel wasn't unemployed for long, and he replaced Julian Nagelsmann at Bayern Munich in 2023. He soon delivered them a league title, albeit after taking over in March. But a German Cup defeat to Freiburg had sections of the fans on the fence right away. The following season, Bayer Leverkusen done the unthinkable and completed an undefeated season under the guidance of Xabi Alonso, and this broke Bayern's 12-year stranglehold on the league title. And after that, Tuchel's job was never really going to be safe, was it? And maybe that's a good thing for England. And that brings us to the present day. Thomas Tuchel was then appointed England manager on an 18-month deal. And you can see why they've given him a short-term deal, given his previous history with boards and disagreements. So it's a bit of a safe play by the FA. So let's get into Tuchel's tactical approach. The first thing that sticks out to me is that Tuchel's training at his previous clubs was so mentally and physically exhausting that games felt, in comparison, quite easy, and that might just be the push England need to find that extra 10%. Tuchel teams can be quite tactically flexible, and it's his willingness to mix up his gegenpress with long balls and direct play that makes him a bit more unpredictable than previous England managers, and this can only be a good thing for us. But something that also sticks out with Thomas Tuchel is his emphasis on psychological training. He regularly shares articles or books to challenge his players' thinking, and that could prove key. And while Southgate made superb progress with this, and undoubtedly helped to relax certain players who struggled under the limelight and the pressure and weight of wearing the England shirt, we ultimately came up short when it mattered most. And Tuchel's psychological nous could prove pivotal in finally guiding this young team over the line. So let's take a look at how Tuchel might set up this England side. As I mentioned, Tuchel's got exceptional ability to adapt systems to the players at his disposal, and that's an exciting prospect. A lot of the England players have actually played under Thomas Tuchel, but there's a big question as to whether those fringe players will actually feature in the World Cup in 2 years' time. Barring injuries, Harry Kane will almost certainly lead the line. While Tuchel dabbled with playing 2 up front at PSG, his teams have mainly featured a lone striker. And whilst Kane is getting old, we still think he's going to be our main man for the World Cup. But the benefit with England is we have a lot of quality strikers Ollie Watkins, Ivan Toney and Dom Solanke could all come on for Kane and make an impact off the bench. And this is where it gets interesting. I actually think Tuchel's going to line up with a 3-4-3 formation. And that's purely because that's the most successful formation he's had in recent years. That's the formation he got the Champions League with Chelsea. So let's work to that assumption. So during his time at Chelsea, Tuchel deployed 2 inside forwards behind the striker in Mason Mount and Timo Werner. For England, this is a very difficult position to pick, but I've gone for Bellingham and Cole Palmer in those 10 positions. You could make an argument to drop Jude Bellingham deeper and play next to Declan Rice. Spoiler alert, Declan Rice will be in the pivot in the middle. But I actually have Kobbie Mainoo playing in midfield with Rice. I feel like that just offers us a bit more balance and control in the midfield area. And then with Bellingham and Palmer just behind Harry Kane, I think that really improves our offensive threat. Now, as I said, it's a 3-4-3, and this is where, I admit, it gets a little bit controversial. So if you're an Arsenal fan, you might want to look away. I'm proposing Saka at left wing back, and I know, but hear me out, Saka's a winger, right? He can play on the right, hasn't really played on the left, but if you play him in one of the 10 positions, I believe he's maybe too central, and you lose a lot of Saka's best qualities, which is beating his man on the wing. Granted, it'll be on the left wing, but I think he's got the ability and talent to be able to do it. But in tournament football, managers have been shown to be a little bit more pragmatic, and I don't think Tuchel would be an exception to this. So he might opt for Luke Shaw, if he's ever fit, or the forgotten man Ben Chilwell. He was obviously very useful in Tuchel's system whilst he was at Chelsea, but the question is he going to get enough minutes between now and the World Cup? Speaking of Chelsea wing-backs that aren't getting any minutes, Reece James. This man is very talented, but very injured. I don't know what's wrong with his hamstrings, but he can't stay fit, and that's a massive issue for Thomas Tuchel. But similar to Chilwell, Reece James was instrumental in Chelsea's Champions League winning team. But again, I have doubts and reservations as to if he can stay fit. And in terms of ability on the ball, I think Trent Alexander-Arnold probably edges Reece James there. So I think Trent Alexander-Arnold would be my choice at right wing back. Now in terms of centre-backs, the 3 that I would choose are Levi Colwill, John Stones and Mark Gohey, and I'll explain why. Levi Colwill has been developing ever since he came back from his loan spell at Brighton. Pochettino used him quite a lot at left back last season. During that time, he was often bombing forward quite a lot. This season, Enzo Maresca's deployed Colwill in the centre of defence. Now I think the combination of experience at left back and left centre back actually means he'd be quite perfect in a back 3. John Stones speaks for himself. He's a great player, plays for Pep Guardiola, crucial part of the team. He's been injured recently, which means he's maybe not been getting as many minutes as he should, but I think that will be rectified ahead of the World Cup. So he was an easy pick for me. And then Mark Gohey, someone who's maybe came out of left field in the last few years, but he had an amazing Euros, and I think that's really earned him a spot in the England team. I think he solidified himself there, and I don't think he put a foot wrong in that tournament. And finally, in the goalkeeper position, it's Jordan Pickford. Whilst I don't think he's a world-class keeper, I don't think you can really pick anyone else for England. And he doesn't really let the side down, so he'd be the key throw pick. So now to the big question, can Tuchel bring home the World Cup after 60 long years? Only time will tell, but what we do have is a proven winner and a tactical mastermind. Tuchel's often struggled with the perpetual media pressure that comes with club football, so the international stage could be his calling, offering the maestro ample time to conjure and focus on his tactics. But as we know, the wheels can dramatically fly off with Thomas Tuchel, so an 18-month contract is an astute decision by the FA. fans will demand that he matches Southgate with at least a semi-final. And if there's any signs of tension, things might get a little bit messy. But with Tuchel, it's always going to be a ride of passion, grit, and exemplary effort, no matter how long it lasts. So what legacy do you all think Tuchel forged with England? Do you think they're now favourites for the World Cup? Or glorified contenders bound to choke when the heat is on? Put your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll leave you with one final thought. If tensions are high before the World Cup, he's only on an 18-month contract, so I don't think the FA would hesitate to sack him, especially if Pep Guardiola is available. And that brings me to the question, did Pep Guardiola ruin football? If you enjoyed this video, then check out my next video on the Spanish great. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.